and I've been studying them over the weekend and speculating about what an extraordinary time we live in, that we can have this much of a view of mankind and of the imagination of man. And of course, thinking of the fact of a store carrying books like this and carrying art supplies. In a way, you see, these are as much art supplies as canvas and brushes. You could almost say they're more, because in some areas canvas and brushes have gone out. You have instead enamel dripped out of cans onto what? Onto board, or onto tin, or onto any surface at all. But the thing which hasn't gone out, and by no means is coming in, is the study of what other expression man has made and what other forms of art there are. And this belongs purely to the 20th century. You wouldn't have had it at all, I think, just a little bit earlier. But we live in what is essentially a visual revolution. As the whole of the 20th century, I think you can just think of it as much a visual revolution as the Industrial Revolution of the 18th or 19th century. All of us have this, and we all partake in it. We partake at various levels, but we are still, as people were not before, constantly assaulted by images, by things of the eye. So much so that some people say that people will forget entirely how to read because they won't have to. Now, I don't feel quite as appalled by this idea as some people do. Isn't that a terrible confession for somebody to make who's teaching? I think that things can be conveyed by images that are of great value to man. It may be that the things of unlimited value can be conveyed by images. In this, I'm a part of the 20th century. I'm a part of our revived faith in the image, our revived feeling that there is something here which is immensely powerful. You could say that it threatens the return of magic, and in a way it does. As we increasingly rely on the image, we increasingly must have it. Now, whether it's in terms of television, or whether it's in terms of movies, or whether it's in terms of Life magazine, all of these things are continually assaulting us with images, with figures, with people, with things to eat, with things to buy, with things that we never thought we would ever see. Maybe something like, mutilated bodies washed up on the shore, and how many times does Life use that kind of thing? Things that we would, in our ordinary lives, wouldn't ever have to see, come at us continually. And we see them. And finally, I suppose we get almost an addiction to the image. Now, the artist is part of that same thing. The artist is not and can never be separate or away from the society that he lives in. Now, it may be not a good thing for him. And I know that some of you must be thinking this. Some of you must be thinking, well, why is it that the artist can't look with those innocent eyes that we talked about before, with eyes not affected by all the other works of art, with eyes that are maybe increasingly professional and trained, accurate, but not relying on previous forms? Maybe this, I hope that you can see this wonderful little cartoon from the New Yorker, or early copy of the New Yorker, that illustrates what undoubtedly a number of you must be thinking. That is, why is it that the artist would deliberately turn to art, to the previous arts, to other artists' work, rather than look at the thing? Instead of looking at the model, he looks at his canvas, you see. That's a very different thing. He looks at his canvas and puts on that canvas all the thing that he desires to put on it, not the thing which necessarily arises from looking at the model at all. In a way, you can say he doesn't need to look at the model. And in a way, it might be that if he did, something would come out which would be very upsetting to everyone. As you can't really predict, because the artist now has to see the things which have been seen. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we can't entirely object, is because it's impossible. As we cannot possibly, because of our technological skills, because of the increase in knowledge that is characteristic of the 20th century, we cannot possibly ask that the artist should be ignorant. We cannot do it. It's an impossibility. What we can ask, and what I always do ask, is that he should know more. That is, that he should not be familiar, say, just with Byzantine painting, and depend entirely on Byzantine painting for his work, for his development of his own work, but have instead a much wider source. I think, in other words, that this thing, which is very often narrowing, should be and can be broadening and exhilarating, as he can see a so much wider field than it was possible for him to see before. And if he will see that, if he will recognize that, he will not be, well, caught in the trap that these people are, who are simply imitating one artist's work and seeing all of nature through one artist's work. Now, people realize that, I think, to some degree, and they realize it in terms of their desire to look. Even if they can't read what they're looking at. I think here you have two books, which one is on Pompeian wall painting, and the other is on primitive art, that very early kinds of art. One is in German, and one is in French. And I know that there's really a pretty limited group of people who can read either German or French or both among the artists that I know or the students of art. But when they get this book, and a great many people would buy this book because the reproductions are very handsome, when they get this book, they get it with the idea of looking at the pictures, really exactly as they buy Life magazine, to look at the pictures, not to read. And in a way, they don't even care very much what there is to read about. Let me see if I can find you another one. This one, which had quite an influence on a number of contemporary painters, Pompeian painting. And they don't care what is being said. They actually don't. They feel that what is being said is not really concerning, something that's going to concern them. But what they can see, they think they can be very much concerned with, and they are. That is just something that is happening in everybody's life at the present time. I mean, that is the general tendency, is to feel that the image alone is enough. It is sufficient. Some people criticize books of art for being so expensive. Well, they are expensive, but they are no more expensive than any other means that you could possibly have of getting to see these things, which I believe it's important. I mean, I think it's of terrible importance for people to see them. It's important because they constitute our present visual world. And insofar as we look at the various phases of man's imagination, we will have one thing, I believe, a better understanding of what man is, man right now. And we'll have also certainly a much better understanding of what art is, what it actually is doing. And if a book is as full of pictures as this, or even more, if I can find it, this book, which has a sculpture of the whole world, you see, right between your hands, costs a lot of money, but think what it would cost you to see this otherwise. Some of the things you would never see in your life. You wouldn't get to the places. Now it's impossible to get to them. Places that are in this world cut off from us so that we can never see them. And some of the things are destroyed and lost. And some of the things we would not be able in a way to find. What we've done when we get such a book as this is we have exchanged our having to discover something for finding someone who can bring us his own great rich discovery. In this instance, it's André Malraux, and a man who has devoted, I suppose, as sensitively as imaginable himself to art and to the whole expression of the imagination of man. He has looked all over the world and found as beautiful photographs as is imaginable of things, some of which you may dislike. But he has brought together in this book almost every phase of the sculpture of mankind. We couldn't do it, you see. We couldn't possibly move from India to China to the earliest prehistoric pieces of sculpture, then back again to France and to Spain, all over the world, and all through time, that is in both dimensions, in the dimension of space and the dimension of time. He has already moved through these and brought us such a thing as this. Now, it's a dangerous thing. It's dangerous in the first place because the same thing which that cartoon shows. That is, that we may become terribly dependent on the works of art. It's dangerous also because our eyes may actually get exhausted. You have to watch yourself with books like these, that you don't get museum eyes instead of museum feet. That is, that things don't begin to go into a haze because you see so many things. But that itself, imagine our fortune to have that as our trouble. I'll see you next time.